Hi, this is Peggy and Killian. We're totally delighted to be a part of the conference. We think it's great that you're organizing this. I'll just say a few words about how the architecture lobby got started, which was basically incredibly organic. My own dismay about how out of the labor discourse the architecture profession was. Artists were talking about labor, manufacturers have talked about labor, creative laborers, immaterial laborers. Architecture just seems completely out of it, not to mention the amount of complaints that we hear, both staff and principals talking about how badly paid they are. A bunch of conversations with friends that made me think, if not us, who, if not now, when, and got together the people who I had met who really did want to talk about this. It was fairly organic, and we then started out with a schedule and very amorphous plans. Killian also then became a major player in this, and I'll let him talk about how he actually sees the structure and work of the lobby.
So right now we have a little bit over 40 active members and many people that are interested in what we're doing, and our work is in a few places. We've been working a lot within academia. We actually just were speaking to someone at the University of Michigan and trying to talk to students in many places. We're also doing research. We're doing specifically research about how the profession has gotten to this place where it has less of a strong hand to play in labor discussions. And finally, we're doing things around media and protests. We're beginning to think about how can we begin to redefine what it means to have a protest around labor issues, especially in a field that, in a moment or a place that it becomes complicated, such as architecture, where management and labor can be very similar.
One of the things that's been an issue for us is how is it that we talk about fair pay for staff who are entering into the profession. At the same time, we don't make that as in some way against the principals or the firm owners who themselves are under difficult circumstances in terms of how they value their work and how they're able to get pay. So how it is that we can actually think about this as a larger system that involves both the level of staff and the level of principals, value at a larger level. In some way, this brings up the issue of the AIA, the question about why the AIA is maybe not doing the work that the architecture lobby is now trying to pick up. We've been in conversations with the AIA. The thing that became very clear to us in their discussions is the larger limits within which they feel that they're working. The limit primarily being they're having been sued by the Justice Department, by the Supreme Court for collusion and trying to fix prices in any kind of discussion that we have in trying to indicate what rightful salaries and pay we might get. So they really work under a kind of fear scenario of not wanting to get sued again, which is why they then are kind of circumscribed now within a project of giving out prizes and trying to get work from the government. We're trying to be the bad boys that don't have to worry about that rubric and really will begin to test boundaries that they no longer want to test.
And this is all happening within a context, and the context is that labor in the U.S. is becoming more and more precarious. And we see it happening in a few places, but the design fields generally are one place where it's definitely happening, and the other one is actually the other, and maybe the service sector. Everything from people that work in retail to people that work in fast food. And there we're seeing some interesting things around unions, where the unions are no longer trying to just bring together laborers that have skills, but rather are beginning to broaden what a union does and bring together people that are in geographic different areas that do different types of jobs, but that have similar interests and problems within their lives. So, low pay under what is considered a living wage. So we're learning from those type of new ways of thinking about unions and organizing labor to do our own work. Most recently, and that you're beginning to see that here, especially with the freelance Freelancers Union in New York City, excuse me one second, which is beginning to organize designers that work freelance or in a precarious manner to provide services that they won't get otherwise, such as healthcare.
One of the things that has emerged in this is the issue of protest and how much protest is actually a function that the lobby wants to endorse and pursue. Protest is maybe something that is seen as part of old tactics, but nevertheless we feel that it's important to not feel muzzled, and so we've actually felt very liberated in terms of how traditional notions of protest kind of get transformed within social media to actually get our message out there and make protest be a certain form of performance and media expansion. So.
Yeah. And the next section is about students, and working within academia is very important to us. Like I said earlier, we're working now with a series of schools trying to set up where we're going to call a network of students, and I don't know if you want to describe that a little bit more.
Well, in kind of this dual nature of trying to make sure that the practitioners see their value in a different way and can kind of prove their metrics to the general population another way. As one end, at the other end is the students that actually go in and work for these firms demand better hours, better pay, better benefits. We really have begun to see that the way of the future rests with the students who are in school now, and that if we can actually catch them to have different modes of expectation, even different practices within school, no all-nighters, a kind of sense that their work is valuable, that they're not lower-class citizens, that they are actually proud of the education and the intellectual environment they're in, that those students are really the future. So there's a lot of emphasis right now on capturing student councils so that we can re-educate the future profession.
And this is very important because here in the U.S., and I'm not sure how Argentina is, but I think that there is a little bit more of a freer education in some places. Here, education costs a lot. So the average for a student to come out of school with debt is about $50,000–$60,000, and in architecture, because we go to school a little bit longer, is even higher. So it's not all that uncommon to have a young architect with very few actual employment opportunities owing $100,000. So they're beginning their professional life that way. And it's important to beginning to talk about those constraints that students are going to have as they go into practice, where they feel like they have to take a job. But it's also important because it begins to talk to point that there are different ways of practicing and collectives, and this is the type of discussion we're having today. And how can we begin to create the networks with here inside the U.S. with students or professionals, but also the larger conversations, for example, with you, in which we begin to tell you and share what our constraints are here and why the labor conditions here are the way they are, and why some of the tools that might work in Argentina to organize and maybe protest or redefine protest may not work necessarily here, but we're going to have to come up with some solutions, some real kind of ways of working within our context, and we hope to be in discussion on some of those with you.
So anyway, just to conclude, I think Killian really kind of outlined in some way what we're thinking about for the future, but just to reiterate it, at some level, the work is very, very local. It's like, how do we actually here in New York, in the United States, get practices to really give benefits, give overtime, getting students to take pledges to say they won't take jobs that don't do that, really hardcore stuff that we can do locally within the American context. But the kind of work that you're doing and the conversations that we can have with you, with people that we have in London, with people that we have in Australia, with people that we have in Canada, it really is at a conceptual level to see that this discussion is not just about the practical issues of raising our benefits, raising our fees, but it's a conceptual level of really uniting workers around a cause that I think we all socially, politically, and economically agree to. So it's a global workers go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.